What are you afraid of? All of us have something, and some of us have more than one something. One of the things I am afraid of are little creepy, crawly things, especially the poisonous ones. If you ever go camping and wake up and shake out your shoes in the morning and get a scorpion, it's not fun. Although it's more fun, I suppose, than putting your shoe in before you discover him, your foot in the shoe. It kind of makes sense, I think, to be scared of spiders and scorpions and centipedes and things like that, because they're venomous. They can hurt you. My discomfort with creepy, crawly little things extends to bugs that are not harmful at all. A big beetle or a praying mantis or a walking stick. If I think about it, I'm not scared of them, but if I'm just sitting there and one of them scuttles across my shirt, yeah. And it was a harmless bug that scared me more than any other. I can still remember it more than 40 years later. I was in college, or actually I was still in high school, and I'd gone out with some friends to see a movie. I came back home late. Was very quiet because I was living in my folks' house. I didn't want to wake them. I went into bed, turned off the light, closed my eyes, and I heard this and that loud scuttling really kind of scared me. So I jumped out of the bed and turned on the light, and I saw that it was a cockroach. Not a small one. It was, that big. But it had scuttled through some papers on my desk and made the really loud noise. I still felt kind of silly being scared of this little bug. But in my defense, the movie I'd gone out to see beforehand was Aliens. So I was maybe a little more sensitive to scuttling noises. We've all got fears, I think. Is anybody afraid of closed-in spaces or being alone in the dark? Is anybody afraid of wide open spaces or strangers or snakes? There are all kinds of things that can frighten us. And I think there's a reason for that. If you go way, way, way back in time, say 35,000 years ago, we lived in a more dangerous world. Human beings were not yet the dominant species on the planet and had to struggle to survive. And having that fear reflex was useful to us at the time. I mean, if you saw a strange insect, you wanted to back away because you didn't know whether it was dangerous or not. If you saw a strange animal, you wanted to maintain your distance. If you saw a tribe of strange people, you wanted to be very, very cautious approaching them because you were living right on the edge of survival. And when you heard a noise in the bushes, it might be a fluffy little bunny rabbit, but it might be a saber-toothed tiger. And so the response that tells you to run and climb a tree could be very valuable to you. Of course, we don't live in the Paleolithic age. The world is honestly quite a bit safer now. It doesn't always feel safer, but there are very few of us who ever have to worry about tigers or sharks or bears or any of those things. I actually saw a listing of the most dangerous animals in the world, and do you know that cattle kill about 20 times as many people as sharks every year? And yet we're not terribly frightened of cattle, well, until they get too close. But we still have that response, that instinctive, when we see something or someone, there's often a fear reflex, and it doesn't serve us nearly as well now as it did back then. In fact, I would say that it didn't serve us as well even in times when the Bible was being written, because humanity by that point, we decided to band together in large groups and build cities and do agriculture, and so we weren't as threatened by animals or even by things like famine as we had been. And so Jesus says to his disciples one time, effectively, don't be afraid. Don't worry. Don't worry about what you'll eat, that is your life. Don't worry about what you'll wear, that is your body. For life is more than food, and the body is more than clothing. And God, who loves you, knows you need these things. We don't always make good decisions when we're frightened, and there are a lot of things that can frighten us in this world, but Jesus has a really good piece of advice for that. When you're frightened, stop it. Nice and simple. When you're frightened, don't be frightened. When you're anxious, don't worry. Trust God. Look at the birds of the air. Birds tend not to worry. I mean, they still have that fear response. If a bird is being chased by a hawk, it's frightened. But when the hawk goes away, the bird goes back to its regular bird business. Flowers are even less frightened. Flowers don't worry about things like scarcity or predators. They bloom wherever they are with whatever resources they have. I think a lot of our fear response is governed by not having enough. Have you ever thought about your life like that? If only I had a little more money. If only I had a nicer car. If only I had a nicer house. If only I had more food stored up. Because I've got plenty. But what happens if there's this huge economic crisis and I don't have 6 months of supplies stocked away in my basement? What happens if I don't have enough land to live on? What happens if I don't have enough clothing? What happens if I don't have enough security? What happens if I don't have enough freedom? What happens if there's not enough to go around? And that's, I think, where a lot of us end out, because our brains are kind of hardwired to think in terms of scarcity, because 30,000 years ago, you had to think that way. We often think of the world in terms of what we don't have instead of what we do have. We kind of call that scarcity thinking, and there's some problems with scarcity thinking, because when you think about what I have, and more importantly what I don't have, you can start to see the world in a funny way. You can start to see everybody else out there, even your neighbors, and maybe especially even strangers, people who aren't like you, as your rivals. And you're all competing for this very limited amount of resources. And for you to have enough to feel truly secure, somebody else will probably have to do without. We don't have enough food to feed everyone. We don't have enough jobs for everyone to work. We don't have enough wealth to take care of everyone. We don't have enough shelter for everyone to have a home. Although experts tell us that that's probably not true, that there's enough food in the world to feed everyone right now. The problem is not that there's not enough. The problem is getting it out there. There are lots of problems with getting it out there. But if we were to get it out there, if we were to be able to reach out in a way that was truly compassionate and just, we could feed and clothe and house every person in the world. When you think about that, when you think about the blessings that God gives us, it changes from scarcity thinking to abundance thinking. God gives us blessings and gives us blessings abundantly, so much so that we not only have enough to take care of ourselves, but we can reach out to others as well. It's a better way to live, I think, because when you're thinking in terms of scarcity, you can start having some really strange thoughts. You can say, well, other people, that's not my problem. I need to take care of me and mine, and other people, if they want to have enough to live, they should get it themselves. Other people don't matter. Maybe other people don't deserve my help. Maybe other people have no claim on my resources because they're mine and I worked for them, and if they don't have enough, well, that's too bad. It's not my problem. Has anybody ever read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Yeah. Douglas Adams describes the most perfect form of invisibility known to advanced science. And I saw one right here. Can you tell us what that was? Oh, you can't? Oh, darn it. You are not a true nerd. Fortunately, I am, so I will tell you. It's the SEP field. And the SEP in SEP field stands for somebody else's problem. If you want to make something completely invisible, you don't want to bend the light, you don't want to make it transparent, you want to surround it with an SEP field, and as soon as people realize that that thing or that person is somebody else's problem, it vanishes from their sight, and they will never notice it again. When we start thinking in terms of scarcity and in terms of everyone as a competitor and in terms of taking care of ourselves, it can make us hard-hearted. Not because we're hard-hearted by nature, but because it's so easy to justify by saying, I'll look after myself. It can make us very judgmental about other people, not because we're bigoted or mean-spirited people, but because it's so easy to say, I know I deserve, but I don't know who else deserves. And so I'm going to make assumptions that most people don't deserve the blessings that I have. But if we turn that around and trust in God, the way the birds do, the way the flowers do, the way all of nature does, if we stop looking ahead and letting our fears become amplified so we think that there is not enough, if we trust in the God of abundant blessings to give us all that we need, something changes. In fact, we see that not only is God going to give us all that we need, but that God already has given us all we need and more. And we start viewing the world through the lens of love. Love is kind of the opposite of scarcity thinking, because love isn't about protecting yourself. Love is about being vulnerable. C.S. Lewis writes that if you love anyone or anything, you're opening yourself up to heartbreak. But it's the only way to live. Love is about vulnerability. Love is about generosity. Love is about compassion. Love is about living fearlessly. Love is about giving yourself away and not worrying because you trust that God is giving you blessings in abundance. Confess, I had another worry, and it has to do with speaking. I put my manuscript over here because I wanted to end with a passage, and I was afraid I would not remember the whole thing perfectly. When we live fearlessly, we do what Jesus says in this parable. Do not keep worrying, for it's the nations of the world that strive after these things, and your Father knows that you need them. Instead, seek you first the kingdom of God and God's righteousness, and all these things will be given to you also. Do not be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give alms. Make purses for yourselves that do not wear out, an unfailing treasure in heaven where no thief comes near, nor moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. When we live unafraid, when we cast off our fears and live lovingly, generously, risking everything, we turn the world around. Things come into focus. Things work in harmony, and the world becomes so much more like the kingdom of heaven. May our hearts always be on God's abundant blessings.